Welcome back to the Buddhist Audio Bookshelf YouTube channel. Today, we continue our reading of Meditation by Thanissaro Bhikkhu, also known as Geoffrey DeGraff. We deeply value your support. Please like and share this audiobook to reach a wider audience, allowing more people to benefit from its wisdom. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, ensuring you receive immediate notifications as we upload new content. Together, we can spread the teachings of meditation and mindfulness, fostering a community of enlightenment and inner peace. Thank you for being part of our journey to make these profound teachings accessible to all. Let's start today with reading. Little Things. July, 2003. Patience is an important quality in the practice. The Pali word for patience, khanti, also means endurance, the willingness to stick with things over the long haul. And although the practice is a long haul, this willingness to stick with things over the long haul translates into the present moment as meticulousness. You're very careful in the steps you're following right now, step by step, not jumping over any steps, not trying to leap from the RSTU or to the FTH. You're willing to go up the stairway, one step at a time, paying careful attention to what you're doing. You're willing to put your trust in the little things you can do in the present moment, confident that they'll build into the bigger results you want. We all want the big results. We want major happiness, major peace, major clarity in our minds. When we look at the step-by-step increments we have to follow, we sometimes get impatient and don't trust them. How could little things like this build up to such big things as release, liberation, nibbana? That's what we think. And yet it's precisely the little unskillful things that get in the way of the big results we want, so we have to pay careful attention to them each time the mind pulls away from the desire for peace or the desire for true happiness. It's a little pull, but over time it adds up to a major habit. The best way to GHT this habit is with a path that's made out of little steps that add up over time as well. At the same time, the willingness to look at the details means that your powers of perception, your powers of insight, get very sharp. There are times when your practice seems to hit a plateau and it's not going anywhere. At times like that, if you turn around to look at what you've been doing, you'll realize that you haven't been looking very carefully. In other words, your meditation has been put on automatic pilot, and you're not paying much attention. You're just going through the motions, so the results just go through the motions as well. The cure for this lies in being very sensitive and precise about what you're doing. For example, focusing on the breath. Be really precise about any tiny little bit of tension or discomfort or dis-ease in the breath. Don't slough over it, because paying attention to the little details is what brings you more and more into the present moment. If you're sloughing over the details, you're sloughing from the past into the future and skipping over the present. So pay close attention to each breath, to how the process of each breath feels in different parts of the body. As you develop your sensitivity, working through whatever tension you detect, you move from where it's really tense to where it's less and less tense, until things are so calm that you can detect even the slightest bit of tension. Work through it, even though it may seem like a little thing. If you leave it, it may turn out to be a seed. It may grow into something larger. There's a story in the canon of a creeper seed that lands next to a sala tree. The devas in the other trees come around to comfort the deva in the sala tree, saying, "Have no fear. Have no fear. Don't worry about that seed. Maybe a ree will burn it, or a woodsman will chop it or step on it, or a peacock will eat it, or maybe it's not even a seed. Well, it turns out to be a seed. It sprouts and grows into a creeper, and the creeper grows up around a tree. At RST, the deva in the sala tree doesn't understand why her friends were so concerned. After all, the creeper's tendrils seem soft, downy, and tender. But then as the creeper grows bigger and bigger, it nearly forms a canopy over the whole tree, pulls down the major limbs, and destroys the tree. That's when the deva realized why her friends were so concerned. This is one of the reasons why you have to be careful about little things, because sometimes they're seeds that can grow. At the same time, when you're attentive to little things, you're beginning to plant your own seeds in the mind as well, different kinds of seeds. seeds of stronger mindfulness, stronger alertness, stronger willpower, determination. All the perfections needed for awakening start with the little things, and they keep growing in little steps, through your being very, very attentive, very, very precise in what you're doing. At the same time, though, you can't be tense in what you're doing. You just watch things very carefully. This is why there's so much emphasis on keeping a broad sense of awareness in the meditation. If your awareness gets very narrow and tense, it's hard to maintain. But if your range of awareness is broad and yet your attention to the details of your focus is precise and sharp, that state of awareness is not just easy to sustain. It sustains itself and becomes a source of strength for the mind. In that way, it sustains you. You want to apply this same attention to detail to all aspects of your life. Not only while you're sitting here with your eyes closed, but also when you're dealing with other people, doing work out in the orchard or at the guest house, whatever your activity. You want to be as precisely with the present moment as possible, so that skillful or unskillful states when they arise in the mind don't pass by unnoticed. This is what it means to be uncomplacent in your practice of concentration. As we chanted just now, one who sees danger and respects being heedful. Well, the danger comes from little things, because little things can turn into big things and sneak up on you from behind. There's another passage in the canon where the Buddha describes 4 things you shouldn't overlook simply because they're small. One is a small tree, another is a small snake, another is a small prince. The prince may be small right now, but in a couple of years he can grow up, and he can carry a grudge from age 3 to who knows how far. The 4th one is a young contemplative, because sometimes young contemplatives have gotten further in their meditation than you might assume. If you treat them with disrespect, that disrespect can backfire on you. Those are outside small things that you shouldn't be careless or complacent about. The inside ones, though, are even smaller, and yet they can do even more damage, on the unskillful side. On the other side, small skillful things can do you a lot of good if you look after them. So don't despise the little victories you achieve in your meditation. Don't be careless about the little defeats, because it's step by step that you get more and more precisely into the present moment, which is where things are going to open up. If you're not paying careful attention here, you're not going to see the opening. So focusing on the little things is not a distraction from the larger issues of the practice. It's actually in the little things that the larger ones appear. So always keep this point in mind, especially when your meditation has hit a plateau or seems to be sliding downhill. Often it's a problem of not paying careful attention, of simply going through the motions. Ajahn Suwat would often describe this as not having enough respect for the little things that you're doing each moment. So try to meditate with an attitude of lightness, but at the same time a sense of respect, of real dedication. That's how the principles of endurance and patience, which sound like long-term principles, translate into the present moment. Being meticulous in what you're doing right here, right now. Nuclear thinking. January 2003. Thoughts come and go, but we keep trying to make them stay. In fact, we've gotten pretty good at making them stay. Without that habit, we wouldn't be able to speak, to hold conversations, to think anything through. So this habit has its uses, but also its drawbacks. It can weigh us down with all kinds of sewering, all kinds of stress when the mind goes overboard in its thinking. The skill in meditation is learning how to think when you want to, how not to think when you don't. It's not a process of putting yourself into a totally blank state where no thinking is ever possible. At the same time, it's not a process of ceaseless thinking. It means learning the right time and the place for your thoughts. The problem is that the mind keeps churning out thoughts at the wrong time, and the wrong place, thoughts you don't want, but they still come in. Sometimes it seems that the less you want them, the more insistent they are in coming. This shows that you've left an opening for them. But before you can see this opening to end exactly what you're doing that admits those thoughts, that's fascinated by them, you have to get the mind as quiet as you can. This is why, in the process of meditation, there's a rhythm between periods when you want to keep the mind as quiet as possible, and others when you want to investigate and explore. There's a rhythm to the practice. And the mind has its own rhythms, too. Sometimes it seems like nothing is going on in the mind, at other times there seems to be nothing but disturbance. The skill in the practice lies in learning how to make use of whatever level of concentration you've got to deal with wherever you are in the rhythm of the mind. In periods when the thoughts seem to be few and far between, you can't let yourself be complacent. Build up your concentration as solidly as you can so that, when the next wave of really obsessive thinking washes over the mind, you'll have stronger tools for dealing with it, stronger tools for not getting swept away. When thoughts come in, remind yourself that there's always a part of the mind that's not involved in the thinking. This is easier to realize when you've been working on developing a large frame of reference for your concentration. Once the breath gets comfortable, immediately expand it, and let that comfortable sensation spread to other parts of the body. Get used to having this enlarged frame, for otherwise, if your mind is totally one-pointed, focused on being aware of only one little point of the body, it gets easily knocked over. One thought can come in and totally overwhelm that one little point without much effort at all. You suddenly end yourself with your concentration destroyed, and your mind splashing all over the place. But if your area of awareness has a broader base all the way from the feet up to the head, all around the body, and if you think of your awareness as a porous space, then when the thoughts come and go, there's space for them to go through without running into anything. They just go out the other side. That way your concentration doesn't get knocked over by the thoughts, both because it's large and because it doesn't put up a surface of resistance. You could put up that surface if you want, and sometimes it's wise to, but sometimes it seems to make the thoughts more obstreperous. So if you have to let them in, okay, let them in, but then just let them go. Think of the body as a large eld of energy. There's nothing solid there. A thought comes in and has nothing to run against, so it runs out the other side. This way you begin to realize that there's nothing you necessarily have to fear about thinking. You have the choice of focusing on your thoughts or not, whichever you want. When you realize that you always have another place to focus, you can have control over your thinking. You just switch back to that mode of that enlarged awareness and stay, leaving the thoughts to pass away on their own. Now don't think that that enlarged awareness is the Buddha's unconditioned. It's more like his reference to the word dhatu, which means property. Back in the Buddha's time they talked about the different properties that make up the body, different properties found in the mind. The basic idea behind the concept of dhatu or property is closer to our word, potential. There's a potential that gives rise to things when it gets aggravated, disturbed, or provoked. When there's no provocation, everything stays very still. This is how they explained Re. They said that the potential lies latent in everything. If you stir it up with a little friction from a stick or nowadays with a match that aggravates the potential, and it bursts into aim. But even when it's not aggravated, the potential is still there. The mind is like that. There's a potential for thinking in every little cell of the body, it seems. In every little speck of your awareness there's the potential for a thought to arise if it gets provoked. When things are still and empty in the mind, it's simply because nothing's been provoked. It doesn't mean that there's no possibility of new things coming out. It's just that they haven't been aggravated. Sometimes there's a strong sense of light that goes along with the stillness, and, again, that's not the light of the unconditioned. It's the light of these potentials, their energy, just waiting to be provoked. So even when nothing seems to be going on in the mind, don't get complacent. Keep trying to develop your concentration even further. Develop this sense of space so that you're really proficient at it, so that you can maintain it all the time. Develop a 360-degree sense of awareness so that when something does get provoked, you're quick to see it. Part of you will say, "Oh, I thought there was nothing there," but the potential for disturbance has been there all along. It's like children in a classroom, at least back in the old days, when teachers had some authority. As long as the teacher was in the classroom, the kids were quiet. They'd wait until the teacher left the room before they'd start running around. If the teacher came back in, they'd sit down and get quiet again. My older brother tells a story from when he was in grade school. He had a really sharp teacher, Mrs. Lane. One day she left the classroom and went downstairs to the restroom to have a smoke. The kids, of course, started running around the classroom until they heard her coming back up the stairs. Everybody then sat down very quietly except for my brother, who was so excited that he continued running around. So, of course, he got caught. Later, after the class, Mrs. Lane took him aside and said, "Look, Galen. You've got to learn how to be sneaky. Listen for when I come up the stairs and then stop running around." She was a sharp teacher. Even though she was downstairs in the restroom, she knew what was going on upstairs. But she was also wise. The way she spoke to him gave my brother the feeling that she was on his side. She knew he wanted to have some fun, and she was showing him how to do it in a harmless way. Mindfulness and alertness are like teachers of the mind, and you've got to train them to be sharp and wise. When alert mindfulness LLS the body, LLS your awareness, then your random thoughts get very quiet. But your thoughts are sneaky. As soon as mindfulness slips a little bit, a new thought forms in the corner. Then it spreads out to LL up all the areas abandoned by your mindful awareness. But if you can re-establish that larger frame, that larger eld of awareness, the thought can go through the eld and not do any damage. It can do its thing, but it won't knock over the frame. But this means that you've got to be very alert, very non-complacent. And that requires work. Then again, that's what concentration is. It's work. But at least it's pleasant work, work in the right direction, giving us a frame of reference from which we can look at our thoughts with more detachment, with less involvement, less identification. This doesn't mean that there's no sense of identification at all, though. Actually, you've just switched your identification. Instead of identifying with the thoughts, you identify with that larger frame, that larger eld of brightened awareness. No matter how much you contemplate the teachings on not-self, the process of identification doesn't end all at once. It moves from things that are blatant and obvious to things more subtle and rened. Only when you've pared it down consistently to the rened level can you let it go entirely. The important point at the beginning is that you learn how to use it, so that you don't latch on to things that are blatantly harmful. Thoughts that pull you into greed, anger, and delusion, thoughts that stir up any of the unskillful potentials in your mind. So this particular step in the meditation, once the breath gets comfortable, start spreading your awareness to LL the whole body, and then allow that comfortable breath to LL the whole body as well as an extremely important part of the meditation. In the Buddha's 16 steps for breath meditation, step number 3 is just this step. You train yourself to breathe in and out sensitive to the entire body. The Buddha puts this step right up there toward the beginning because it's so fundamental. When he talks about a mind in concentration, he calls it Mahagadam Siddham enlarged awareness. The images he gives for the states of right concentration are all images of enlargement. When you're allowing that sense of ease and pleasure to permeate the body, he says it's like a bathman or a bathman's apprentice who would need water through a ball of bath powder. Back in those days, they didn't have soap, they had a powder, like ours, to bathe with. They'd make a dough out of the powder by kneading water into it, until no part of the ball of dough was dry, and yet the water wouldn't ooze or drip out. This is the stage of working the initial sense of ease and pleasure throughout your whole body. In the second and third levels of jhana there's a similar process, but with less effort. You let the pleasure or rapture corresponding to that state pervade your whole awareness, suas your whole body. The image given by the Buddha is of a spring of cool water welling up from the bottom of a lake, permeating the entire lake. As for the third jhana, which is more quiet and less of an intensely rapturous state, he said that it's like lotuses submerged in a still lake, permeated entirely by the water of the lake from their roots to the tips of their buds. With the fourth jhana, the image is of a person with a bright cloth covering the whole body, the same way your bright awareness LLS the whole body. So it's obvious from these images that jhana is a state of broadened awareness. And this broadened awareness is really important. For one thing, it gives you a RM basis so that you don't get knocked over by distracting thoughts. At the same time, it allows your vision to become more all around, 360 degrees all around, so that you're aware of all the little potentials in the body, all the little potentials in the mind that can get provoked in one way or another. That way you can be quicker and quicker to see the very early stages of provocation. When the slightest stirring comes, you'll notice it. It's not quite a physical stirring at RST, nor is it really mental. It's on the borderline between the two. When you latch onto it, there will be a little bit of tension that you create in the body to provide a place for the mind to stay latched on. This is how the stirring turns into a swelling. In this way, thinking is both a mental and physical process. If you have this broadened state of awareness, you can dissolve the little swelling before it turns into a thought, and can take over your whole awareness. As you stay with the breath energy in the whole body, you're operating right on the borderline between body and mind, between physical and mental phenomena, right where those thought potentials begin to swell. You can deal more quickly with the beginning of anything, any potential that would come either in the body or the mind. This is why concentration is such an important state for gaining insight. Because it improves your vision. Your vision becomes more all around, more precise, focused on the area where things get provoked, this interface between body and mind. Then, if you want to think, you can think. If you don't have to. When the time comes to think, the mind will have been properly rested. Your thinking will be a lot clearer, more to the point. When the time comes to stop, you keep your thinking under control. It doesn't keep riding out in all directions. Most people's thinking is like an uncontrolled nuclear chain reaction. One little neutron shoots out, runs into another nucleus, which sends out more neutrons, which keep on multiplying until suddenly the whole thing explodes. Concentration is like exerting control over the reaction, building a reactor and inserting graphite rods to make sure the reactions don't go out of control. If you want to shut everything down, you can insert all the rods all the way in, and everything will be still. That doesn't mean that the potential for a reaction isn't there, just that it's been stilled. If you need to think, pull the rods out a little bit to get just the reaction you want. When the thinking has done its work, you push the rods back in. This way, when thoughts come and go, you get whatever use you want out of them. They don't take over your mind. You stay in charge. Stepping back. May 13, 2005. When you meditate, it's easy to get frustrated. Here you are, looking at the breath, and as Ajahn Lee says, just 4 concentrations, and you can't master them. The mind keeps slipping away. And no matter how determined you are to stay with the breath, you end yourself someplace else. Often it doesn't seem like the meditation's heading in any particular direction, just kind of mucking around, and you wonder, what does this have to do with the deathless? What does this have to do with true happiness? That's when it's time to step back and look at the larger perspective. The big issue, of course, is your mind. No matter where you live, no matter where you go, you've got the mind right there. If you can't keep it under any kind of control at all, you're living with something very dangerous, because all kinds of things can happen to it. A slight chemical imbalance in the body and the mind gets really depressed. It can't seem to pull itself out of the depression. Or it starts hallucinating. There are all sorts of things the mind can do, all kinds of things the brain can do. It's important to keep a distinction between the mind and the brain. The brain is the physical organ, while the part of the mind we're interested in is just basic awareness. We use the organ to think, but if the organ is damaged in any way, out of balance in any way, then our thoughts become our enemies. And what are you going to do then? If you have enough mindfulness to pull yourself out of your thought worlds, you're safe. If you have enough mindfulness to pull yourself out of anything the mind does, you're safe. We talk about the mind clinging, the mind hanging on to things, but it doesn't have hands to cling. When it clings to something, it just keeps thinking about it over and over and over again. It keeps wanting it over and over and over again. To let go of the clinging means that you just let it stop. And the only way you can let it stop is to get out of it and see it simply as an event in the mind. The last time I went to visit with Ajahn Suwat before he passed away, he commented that his brain was sending him all sorts of weird messages, and he'd learned that he had to put a question mark after everything that came into his mind. But he said, that thing I gained from the practice, that hasn't gone away. That thing was what enabled him to pull out of those messages in order to see that they were strange, weird messages, and that he didn't have to believe them. He had a foundation, so even as the brain was churning out weird perceptions, he had access to a dimension where he didn't have to get involved. As we meditate, we're working in the direction of that dimension. The RST step is to establish a safe place through concentration to keep our awareness based, a place where it's protected. And that's worth all kinds of effort, all kinds of discouragement, all the things we have to go through in order to get there, because the real sense of solidity and safety that comes with that is more than you can imagine. You realize how long you've been wandering around, misled by your thoughts, and how totally deluded you were, and how much suffering it caused. Then when you can step out, really step out, even out of that base of concentration, an enormous burden is lifted. In its place you gain both a sense of the solidity of that new dimension, and the confidence that nothing can touch it, because it's outside of space and time. As for what's going to happen inside of space and time, that's a matter of karma. Even awakened people have to age, grow ill, and die, but they've found the dimension that doesn't age, doesn't grow ill, doesn't die. And how did they end it? By doing what we're doing right now. Every time a thought comes up, here's your chance. Are you going to fall for the thought, or are you going to step back from it? The thoughts may be crazy, they may be things you don't want to think about, but as long as you're able to step back from them, you're in a good position. This place where you're stepping back may not be as totally solid as you'd like it, but it's heading you in the right direction. If you don't have this, you have no safety at all. There's no protection, no perspective at all. Without the perspective, there's no wisdom, no insight. And without insight, you're totally immersed in delusion. What is it like to be totally deluded? You're totally unsure of things. Deep down inside, things don't seem quite right, and there's always an element of fear. As the Buddha said, as long as you're uncertain about the true Dhamma, there's always the fear of death. What's going to happen when you die? The only way you can know is by looking at the processes of the mind, because it's already going through death and birth on a small level all the time. It just keeps coming back, coming back, coming back. Whatever habitual patterns you've been encouraging in the mind, they just keep coming back again and again and again. But the fortunate thing is that you can step out of them. This is what the Buddha's teachings on karma are all about. Not everything is predetermined in the mind. With every present moment, there's always the opportunity to make a new decision, to make a new choice, but most of us abandon that freedom and just keep owing along with the same old patterns over and over and over again. We need to learn to appreciate our ability to step back and get some perspective, to pull ourselves out of our thought worlds. No matter how eating you're stepping out may seem as you're practicing, each time you do it you're strengthening the skillful habit in the mind, the habit that's actually your path. Ajahn Mahabua tells of how when Ajahn Mun passed away, he was really hit with a sense of despair. What was he going to do with his life now? When issues came up in his meditation, to whom would he go for help? He said he felt like someone who'd been depending on a doctor for long years, and now the doctor was gone. It was like being a wild animal in the forest with no doctor at all. But then he remembered all the teachings he'd gotten from Ajahn Mun in the past. Those would have to be his teachers now. And what was the point that Ajahn Mun emphasized more than anything else? Whenever anything comes up in your mind that you're not sure about, just step back and stay with that sense of the knower, that sense of just basic awareness, and no matter what, whatever it is in the mind will pass, and you'll be safe. It seems like such a little thing, just the sense of the watcher, the observer, but it can keep you safe, because it's the faculty of the mind that can pull you out. Even when storms are blowing through the mind, you're in a safe spot. You've got your haven right here. Just don't let yourself get pulled into the storms, because they can blow you all over the place. The Buddha once said, "Look at the animal world. See how variegated it is, all those many kinds of animals, all the different shapes they take, all the different ways they live." Then he added, "The mind is more variegated than that. It can get itself into all kinds of zess. But you've also got your protection right here. It's right close to hand. It's closer than your eyes." The point in meditation is to learn how to appreciate it, how to value it. Even though it may seem unstable right now, keep coming back, coming back, coming back. If you don't, what lies in store? You get blown around in the whirlwind, like the shades in Dante's Inferno. If you do step back, though, you indeed that you're strengthening a very important habit. Each time you remember to come back builds a pathway in the mind. When you come to meditate in a place like this, it's as if you've got your nose above water, you've pulled yourself out a little bit from the ood. That's what they call it, the ood. All these things that come pouring out of the mind. If you're not careful, they can totally immerse you. You can drown. But here you've got your nose above water. You can breathe. It may not yet be the most stable position, but the Buddha says that it can become your island. You've got your island in the midst of the ood here. It may not be a big island, but it's big enough. As you develop it, it opens up to even better things in the mind. Without this sense of awareness, what would you have? Nothing. Nothing to hold on to at all. You'd be swept around in the storms that the mind cooks up. With this, though, you have hope, and it's not a far-off hope. It's something right here. If you learn how to value it, it'll open up and show you all it has to offer, more than you can imagine. It's like one of those fairy tales where there's the ugly little troll under the bridge, who, as it turns out, has gold stashed away. The valuable things in life are often in the places where you'd least expect to find them, and they're closer to home than you might think. So keep this in mind. You've got gold right here, but it's covered up by dust and dirt, and the dust and the dirt can be cleared away. Aside from this gold, you have nothing. With the gold you have no more needs. Taking a stance. February 20, 2005. Try to gather your awareness around the breath. Make the breath your center, a center from which you can act, speak, and have a sense of a good foundation. In Pali, the word for the object of the mind, aramana, literally means a support for the mind. When you meditate, you want to end a good solid support, because when your support is solid, you can deal with whatever's coming at you from whatever direction, whether thoughts inside the mind or things people do or say from outside. Your response, if it comes from a solid foundation, is coming from a position of strength. When you come from a position of strength, the things you do, say, and think are well thought out. They aren't desperate, aren't grasping. If your center is based on things outside, if you're really concerned about what this or that person thinks about you, you're putting yourself in a very weak, uncertain position. Your foundation isn't solid. When it isn't solid, the things you do aren't well based. When I went to Thailand, I taught at Chiang Mai University. One of the things I learned in my spare time there was Thai boxing. When you're taught Thai boxing, all the emphasis is on your stance, the stance from which you're going to hit or kick your opponent. If the stance is solid, you're coming from a position of strength. This may sound a little aggressive, but it's an important point to remember as you go throughout life. When you're dealing with other people, when you're dealing with all the issues in your mind, you want to come from a good solid position, so you can deal with these things effectively. The breath is always here. When you're at ease with your breath, when you feel comfortable with your breath, you've got a good foundation. That's where you can take your stance. Then when you respond to things, you're coming from a solid position. Your response is more precise, more on target. So try to practice, keep coming back to the breath, because this is a foundation you've got to build. It may seem artificial at RST, but as you get more and more used to it, you see that it really does provide a sense of being at home. One of the Pali terms for a concentrated mind, Viharadhamma, means just that. A home for the mind, a place where you feel safe, where you feel solidly protected, not only from things outside, but also from all the issues that come bubbling up from inside as well. Because the biggest problems in life are not the events from outside, but in how you react to them. Even before events come at you from outside, things come bubbling up from within the mind. Sometimes anger comes up in the mind, and then you go looking for something to be angry about. It's not in response to anything outside, it's simply an urge coming up in the mind. Then you go out to focus on something outside that you decide you don't like, and the anger builds on that. The same with lust, with fear and anxiety. Sometimes the feeling comes bubbling up, and then you look for an object for it to focus on. So it's not the case that all problems come from outside. Actually, most of them come from within, but the fortunate thing is that not everything inside is problematic. You've got good qualities in here as well, so you want to give them a place to gather so they can pull their strength. That's why you need this foundation. When you're staying with the breath, you've got mindfulness, the ability to keep something in mind. You keep reminding yourself, stay right here with the breath. And then there's alertness. You watch the breath as it comes in, goes out, you know what's happening. It's right there. Whether it's comfortable or not, you know. If it's not comfortable, you can change it. This is called evaluation. The basic indicator is, does the breath feel good or not? For the Buddha, the big issue in life is zuering, so we start with a minor version of it, a minor sense of discomfort coming from the breath. Why breathe in a way that's uncomfortable? Nobody's forcing you. It's your own lack of attention that allows the breath to get uncomfortable. So pay attention and then learn to work with the breath. See what kind of rhythm feels good, because when the breath goes well, it gives you strength, a sense of well-being, a sense of being nourished, around which all your other good qualities of mind can gather. When they can gather together, they strengthen one another. So even though staying focused on the breath may require time and effort, it's an important skill, for once you have this center, it's here not only when you sit with your eyes closed. Wherever you go, there's the breath. When you learn to relate to the breath in a good way, you have a good relation going on inside. In other words, you learn to treat the breath with goodwill. You want the breath to be comfortable. When you ND that it's not comfortable, you work to help it. That's compassion. When it is going well, you help to maintain it. That's appreciation. And when it gets to the point where it's as good as you can get it, you can't get it any better than that, you say, for the time being, this is as good as it's going to get, let's sit down. And just be right here. That's equanimity. If you learn to relate to your own breath in these ways, it becomes a lot easier to relate to events and people outside with the same qualities. If there's a turmoil inside, then the turmoil tends to affect your relationships with other people. The way you relate to yourself inside forms the pattern, the template, for how you relate to people outside. So you want to establish a good relation in here, a good family relationship with all these good qualities. Mindfulness, alertness, your discernment in telling what's comfortable and what's not, your ingenuity in figuring out ways to make things more comfortable. And the qualities of goodwill, compassion, appreciation, and equanimity, they play a role here as well. When you learn to relate to the breath with these qualities of mind, then every time you get in touch with the breath, the qualities can be there as well. They nurture and inform the way you're going to react to whatever comes up, wherever you are. Whether it's at work or at home, or between work and home, whether you're alone, whether you're with other people, when you've got this good relationship going on inside, when you feel at home with all these good qualities in the mind, then you can tap into them whenever you want. So this ability to ND a center, to establish a foundation in the mind, is one of the basic skills we need to be happy, to be friends with ourselves. The chant just now on true friends and false friends doesn't refer just to people outside. It also refers to qualities of mind. Some qualities in the mind, like greed, anger, and delusion, are false friends. They come promising all kinds of things, and then they don't deliver. They run away to desert you, leaving you worse off than before. Those are your false friends inside. The true friends are the ones who are really helpful, like the good qualities we're trying to gather around the breath here. So, You attend to them earnestly. As the chant says, try to keep these qualities informing the way you relate to the breath, and that becomes the foundation from which you relate to things in all your activities. We have a whole hour to work at this skill, a skill that you don't leave here when the hour is up, but that you take with you. It becomes the basic pattern for how you relate to the body, how the mind relates to itself. It cuts through a lot of the unnecessary stress and frustration, unnecessary turmoil in the mind. So look at this hour as an opportunity to provide yourself with a center. And then after the hour is over, take this center with you wherever you go, because it's always here. The breath is the point where the mind and the body meet, and as long as you're alive, you have this breath right here. If you can learn to be at home right here, you're going to have a home wherever you go. As a result, wherever you go will be your own space. A large part of our life is spent in feeling that somehow other people have taken possession of our space, and we need to depend on their approval so that we can occupy their space. But that's not the case here. This is your space. When you're happy and comfortable inhabiting your space, you're coming from a position of strength and well-being at all times. Social anxiety. September 10, 2005. In one of Ajahn Lee's last Dhamma talks, he compared life to taking a boat across an ocean. The problem out on the ocean is that there's no fresh water. For most of us, meditation is like stopping in a port, picking up some fresh water, and putting it in the boat. Then we go out to sea and discover that we've run out of water, so we have to go back to port. As a result, we don't get very far. If we're not careful, the winds will blow us away from the coast, and we'll end ourselves without any water at all. In other words, when we meditate, we pick up a good sense of ease, a sense of inner refreshment. It's like stocking up on water. But then we take it out and we pour the water out our eyes and ears, all over the place. So we have to come back, meditate some more, get some more water back and forth like this. We never really stock up on enough water to take us across the ocean. So an important lesson we have to learn is how not to pour the water out. What this means is learning how to maintain your center with the breath, inside the body, even when you go outside and deal with other people. This is one of the big issues in any meditator's life. Ajahn Lee has another passage where he compares the meditation to making the mind one, and then turning it into zero. Now, when you have zeros, there are two things you can do with them. You can put them in front of numbers, in which case they have no meaning at all, you don't read them, they don't count, or else you put them after other numbers, in which case 1 turns into 10, and then 100, then 1000, and then 10,000. If the zeros get put after, you've got lots of issues, but if the zeros get put RST, no matter how many zeros you have, they don't add anything, don't burden the mind at all. It's the same way with the mind. You make it zero and then you put the zeros RST. Then when you deal with other people, what they say doesn't count. It's interesting that Ajahn Lee focuses on what other people say as one of the tests for a mind that's really at peace. The Buddha makes a similar point in one of the Dhammapada verses. If, when other people say harsh things to you and you don't reverberate like a cracked gong, that's a sign that you've attained true peace of mind. This might seem strange. Why does the test lie in how you react to what other people say? The mind is very sensitive to this issue. We learn very early in our lives that our happiness is going to depend on how other people treat us. As children, we're surrounded by people a lot more powerful than we are, so there's always a sense of fear built into our relationships to the people around us. We become sensitive to other people's moods, sensitive to what they might do, what they might say. As a result, our center of gravity is placed outside because we're afraid of them, and we try to put up a wall outside ourselves to protect ourselves from them. What this means is that our psychic center of gravity gets moved outside the body. If you've ever taken any martial arts classes, you know that if your center of gravity is outside your body, you're in bad shape. You're in a weak position. Now the Buddha doesn't say to ignore other people and just be very self. He says there's a different way to approach the whole issue of happiness. In other words, you are a source for happiness that doesn't take anything away from anyone else, so you don't have to be afraid of other people. When you're not afraid of them, you are that you can actually be more compassionate to them. So developing and maintaining this enter inside is not a self thing. The Buddha's not teaching you to be insensitive. He's just saying to put yourself in a stronger position and to trust that you're stronger by not trying to go outside and accept people's moods and all the other things that we think we can do with other people when we're dealing with them. Just stay inside and have a sense of confidence that you're strong inside. After all, your source of happiness lies inside. Because it's not taking anything away from anybody else, you don't have to be afraid of them. Especially when you can get your awareness to the whole body, when you get the breath flowing smoothly throughout the whole body. This smooth flow of energy builds up a kind of force field. An image in the canon is that the meditator who's able to the body with awareness is like a door made out of solid wood. If you were to take a ball of string and throw it at the door, it wouldn't make any dent in the door at all. The mind led with awareness, with the breath energy flowing smoothly, is the same sort of thing. It's solid. It resists outside influences. But when your awareness doesn't the body like this, the Buddha says it's like a ball of wet clay into which somebody throws a stone. The stone makes a big dent in the clay. In other words, you're in a weak position, and you intuitively know you're in a weak position. Other people can invade your inner space. So you scramble around and try to build up all sorts of defenses. Because so much energy gets spent in the defenses, and the energy is outside the body, it knocks you out of balance. You use up the water of your meditation, the refreshment of your meditation, very quickly this way. The trick, as Ajahn Lee says, is to have a little distillery in the boat, so that you can take this salt water and put it into the distillery, to turn it into fresh water. Then everywhere you go you've got fresh water. In other words, no matter where you go, you're right here. Centered in the body, with your awareness linked the body. You're not leaving the body unprotected, and you're not using up all your energy in those false outside defenses. You're creating a sense of energy here in the body, a sense of refreshment, and it's protecting you as well. This way you can travel around the world because there's salt water everywhere. If you've got the skill, you can turn it into fresh water, as much fresh water as you want. So as you leave meditation, it's important that you watch to see. How does the mind move? How does it go owing out your eyes and ears into the space outside your body? If you catch it and bring it back in, how is it going to complain? There's going to be a sense of fear, or a sense of uncertainty about trying to stay inside. In the beginning you may feel unprotected. Don't listen to those voices. Those are voices that took over your mind when you were a little child and didn't know anything. That was the best you could do at that time, but now you've got more skills, better skills, more understanding. Learn how to reason with those voices. Here's a good solid place, a good safe place, a secure place to be right here inside the body, and you're operating from a position of strength. And just that much is not only a gift to yourself, but also the people around you. They'll sense the difference as well, and it makes your interaction with them a lot easier. So learn to have some trust for this sense of being inside the body. The awareness that LLS the body, the breath energy that LLS the body, can protect you in a lot of ways. It can provide the nourishment and the refreshment you need at all times. At the same time, it develops a momentum in the practice. If you keep on creating all the water you need, when you have more than enough, you can share it with the people around you. Your sense of what it means to interact with people will change, will be a lot less fearful, and your sense of what it means to be refreshed will grow deeper and stronger. The Mind Song. May 2003. Ajahn Lee used to say that there are 2 steps to getting started in the meditation. One is to get your body into position. Right leg on top of the left leg, or left on top of the right, depending on what you are more comfortable, your back straight, facing forward, your eyes closed, your hands in your lap. The next step is to get your mind in position. And that's more difficult because the mind doesn't usually want to stay in any one particular position. It's always running around, always quick like a high-strung cat to jump at anything that comes along. Ajahn Mun once talked about the mind song. There are rhythms that go through the body, rhythms that seem to go through our awareness. And we start singing along with them without really realizing it, and then we're wherever the melody will take us. When we put the mind in position, we stop singing along. We just watch what's going on. So you bring it to the breath. It's a good way to get out of your head and down into the body. Give yourself a good comfortable place to stay and be aware of the breath coming in, aware of the breath going out. Notice how the breathing feels in different parts of the body, because the breathing is a whole body process. If it's not a whole body process, that's a sign that there's a blockage someplace you've got to work with. But get a good breath rhythm going in any one spot where it's easy to watch. It might be at the nose, the chest, the abdomen, the neck, the middle of the head, any place where all the different pressures of the breath coming in and going out, and the pressures of your blood circulation feel right together. Focus right there and allow the breath to end whatever rhythm feels good, feels gratifying. If the mind wanders bring it right back. If it wanders again, bring it back again. You're trying to put it in position, which means needing a good comfortable posture for the mind. And then trying to get it to stay in position. It's the staying that makes all the difference. If you just get into position and then quickly jump away, you don't get the BTS of being in position. And there are lots of BTS. 1. You're giving the mind a place to rest, so that it can recover its strength from all that running around. And 2, when it's in position it can watch, because if you ever want to watch something carefully you have to be very still. If you're running around all the time everything is a blur. You snatch a little sight of something here, snatch a sight of something there, but you don't see anything continuously. Which means you don't really understand it. So we're trying to put the mind in a position where it can stay and watch continuously. This position of the observer is a very important part of the meditation, the observer that doesn't go singing along with the different rhythms or thoughts coming through the mind, but watches them as events. When you're watching things as events, you can decide which things are worth following through with, and which ones are not. Of course, you sometimes end yourself slipping into your old habits of singing along. But you can catch yourself, stop, and come back to the breath. Come back to this position of the observer. Get more and more used to being here. This is where the mind can have a sense of being at home, where it can rest, where it can accurately watch the movements of the mind. Where are they running to? Are they going to a place you want to go? If not, you just drop them, and whatever reality they seem to have will dissolve away. It's because you give them a reality that they become solid and imposing and gain power over you. But if you learn simply to watch them as events, you can gain the upper hand. So what you're doing here is developing a place for the mind to rest, a place where, in resting, it heals itself. At the same time, it can watch. And in the watching it learns not to build up new diseases. As any doctor can tell you, there are 2 parts to maintaining good health. One is taking the medicine when you need it, and the other is having a healthy lifestyle. If you want to be healthy, it's not good to eat unhealthy food, go around smoking, eating junk food, and then coming to the doctor to ask for medicine. The medicine will help, but not nearly as much as when you have a healthy lifestyle where you're not putting the junk into your system to begin with. And the same holds true for the mind. We come here to meditate to help heal the mind from all the damage it does to itself. We tend to think more of the stress coming in from outside, but actually we're playing along with the outside stress, we're singing along with the outside stress, which is why it gets into the mind. So we come here, close our eyes, sit in a still position, and give the mind a chance to wash out all the unhealthy energies it's picked up. This is a good thing to be doing, but it would be even better if we could maintain this position of the observer all the time. That's a healthy lifestyle for the mind. This is what you want to try to do as the mind gets accustomed to settling down with the breath. Not only when you're sitting here, but also when you get up and start moving around. Try to maintain this same inner position. This same inner posture of being the observer. And try to notice when you lose it. That's a sign you've run across something important. One of those tricks the mind plays on itself to go someplace it knows it shouldn't. That's one of the reasons for these lapses. The other is that it simply forgets itself and just starts singing along with whatever thought comes along, whatever mood comes along. These things seem to have so much reality simply because we sing along with them. But if you can maintain the position of the observer, you watch these things as they come, and you begin to see the damage they can do if you take them in. You realize that you have the choice. You don't have to play along with them, you don't have to sing along with them, you don't have to take them in. You're now in a position of strength, a position where you can watch, where you can see these things simply as events, rather than as the worlds to enter into. In this way you end that the medicine of sitting meditation can seep deeper and deeper, and show more effects than you might have imagined before. Up to now it's simply been a holding action. When things are bad, you sit down, you wash things out of your system, you feel better, and then you go back to your old habits. As a result, the meditation doesn't get a chance to penetrate deeply, to show itself as anything more than simple stress reduction or momentary relief from all the sewering you're carrying around. But when you can maintain the position of the observer, it becomes a lifestyle, a way of living in which you're not bringing in all those other things to burden the mind to begin with. No matter how the body moves, no matter how thoughts move, you maintain this position. If you can keep this up, then when you come to sit and meditate, the meditation goes deeper, deeper, and deeper. You see that it can do more than you might have imagined. It can address the more subtle diseases in the mind, the more subtle harm the mind is doing to itself. It's like maintaining a yoga position or a stretch. The RST couple of seconds are hard because you feel stiff, but then you relax into the stretch. As you relax, you can go further into the stretch because you give it more time, more continuous time, to work its effects. Meditation is not here simply for coping with the stresses and strains of life. It's for showing how we can ultimately go beyond causing any sewering or stress for ourselves at all, not only for ourselves, but also for the people around us. Ultimately, we learn to drop even the position of the observer to open up to a different dimension in the mind that lies outside of time, outside of space, outside of all the worlds we can create for ourselves. But to see that you have to make the observer strong. And to do that you have to give the meditation time, and you have to make it part of a lifestyle, a way of living, an inner posture, an inner position that you maintain this observer who watches the moods come and go, watches the thoughts come and go, doesn't sing along with them, doesn't cause itself the damage it used to. Over time you that the posture of the observer goes deeper and deeper. The observer can see more and more because you give it the time to develop, to become strong, to become your real home where you settle down. So ideally, ultimately, when you meditate, it won't be a matter of getting in position. You'll get the body in position, but the mind will already be in position, the habitual position of the observer. Instead of running out after things, singing along with this tune, singing along with that, you're stepping back a bit. You have a place to step back and simply watch these things. If there's any use to them, you follow through with them. If not, you let them go. This becomes the basic stance of the mind. As I said, when you reach that point, the meditation shows that it can do a lot more than you might have imagined. It can solve problems you didn't even know you had, eliminate levels of sewering and stress you didn't even know you were causing, because they were always there in the background. Now that the mind is even more subtle and still, it can see these things. And it's only when you see things that you can let them go. In keeping with the Buddha's teachings, we underscore the profound significance of disseminating wisdom extensively. Today, we've converted this voluminous 1,000-page tome into an easily accessible audio format. Now, the responsibility to further this noble cause rests with you. Through your subscriptions, likes, and content shares, you play a pivotal role in the widespread distribution of these teachings, benefiting countless others. Let's uphold the age-old tradition of sharing knowledge and fostering mindfulness for the greater good of humanity. We invite you to join us in this mission, And together, we can create a profound impact on the lives of many,